Life isn't perfect, and sometimes we get lost. If you're like me, you might have woken up one day realizing that you never had the opportunity to explore, much less get to know, your true self. This episode is devoted to helping you find simple strategies for reclaiming or finding for the first time your amazing true self. From creating internal room for self discovery to carving out a sacred space for solo time, this episode is all about finding space to let your best self radiate. After all, we can't truly shine if we don't know who we are. I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Erika Kotite, who will be sharing with us her expertise on creating and using sacred spaces for self-care and overall wellness. Erika is an expert in her field and a role model for women and all genders in the art of creating room to learn, grow, and simply be. Oh, goodness, Erika, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to spend time with you. So, before we get going on the meat of the podcast, tell me and listeners a little bit about what makes you you.
Well, I am a California girl. I'm a fifth generation, so it's in my blood, and I am a writer. I am a reader of anything that is a novel. I love traveling. I love historic homes. I love the whole writing process, and it's been my career for many, many years. And I also am a mother of three children, all grown up now, and wife to a wonderful husband.
Wow, that's a lot. Plus, I believe I know you quite well. We're old dear friends, but I believe you also love Jane Austen, among all those many other loves.
Yes, I was going to mention Jane Austen, but I knew that was not the topic, so I restrained myself.
Well, it's funny because Jane Austen, I think she is one of the women that really teaches us how important it is to know yourself and how it is not only normal and natural to get lost on the journey of life, but how it is so important to reclaim yourself, to find yourself and stand in your truth. And that's pretty much, the basis, the foundation of this podcast. So thank you for joining me and for shining some light on this really important topic. So when you're looking, so many times clients, listeners write and say, hey, I've lost myself. I don't know who I am anymore. Or people will write and say, I followed this path. I'm on this career trajectory and I hate it. I did it to please my mother, my father, my whomever, and I am hating life. I look in the mirror and I don't recognize who I am. As the creator of She Sheds a Room of Her Own, which to me is a book that's very symbolic of the importance of having a sacred space for internal and external discovery. What would you say to this plethora of women and people of all genders who get lost and then wake up one day and say, how can I create some sort of space in my life, my busy, chaotic life, to find out who I am or to reclaim who I was a long time ago? So,
That's a big one. I think that in many people's lives, it's a lot easier to flow along with the people you love and the necessity of having a job and supporting yourself and pleasing your parents and all of the social uh, edicts that we all live by, and they very easily consume more than their share of you as the self. And most of the time, it happens quite smoothly where you don't even realize it. And unfortunately, it takes sometimes a negative epiphany or a trauma or a severe disappointment in life or a great sadness uh, that it sometimes takes something that big to point you to the fact that I don't I don't know myself. Who am I? It brings you back to the existential questions. And for some people, it happens early on, luckily, say in high school or college. And for others, they might be retiring. In fact, retiring is a huge life change that a lot of times women and men will sit down in their favorite chair and say, "Dear Lord, I've got the whole day in front of me, and I don't even know what I like to do, or who I want to be with, or what makes me tick." So it's quite interesting, how it comes about in each individual life and at what age, and then of course what that person is going to do about it.
Absolutely, and I think you made me think about with the retirement part in my I think it's my 3rd book, Aging Joyfully, where I talk about that part that often occurs when children leave the home and a woman or a man is there. It's what we often refer to as the midlife crisis, but it can happen anytime, and you go, "Oh, who am I? My kids are gone. What is my role in life? I'm no longer a mom or a worker bee or this or that. Who am I?" And so, what would you say? Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about you, but before we go into that, what would you say are some really important tips for all of the souls out there who reach that point wherever it is in their lives, high school, college, 30, 40, 50, 60? What are some ways that a person can create some space internally and externally to allow themselves to go through what is often that dark night of the soul of finding out, who am I? And it gives me shivers because, I've been there, and it is a dark place to have to wake up one day and think you had it kind of all figured out and realize you have nothing figured out. Nothing.
I think that the first step is to really look for that solitude in life. A lot of
Mhm.
people think that they have, oh, I have plenty of time. I have shower time. I have drive time. I have a lot of times where I'm alone. But the bottom line is most people consciously or unconsciously seek to surround themselves with people and with tasks, and they don't really have meaningful time alone to process and to think and to reflect on where they've been and where they're going. And so my first tip would be to expand significantly your solitude. It doesn't mean you have to be lonely. It usually means you should be alone. And and those alone times where you're not you don't have an agenda, that you're just absorbing who you are. You might be thinking about your past. You might be contemplating your future. It's you just need time with yourself. I notice a lot of people, or I've asked a lot of people about going out to eat and whether or not they would go alone. And most people are horrified at the prospect of being in a restaurant with a table of one. And it's funny because that's the one thing I'm sort of contrary about. And I really love going out to dinner by myself. And, usually I bring a book, so I'm not saying it's quality alone time. I'm saying that's an example of something you could think about. Why do I not like to dine alone? I know it's a very, very social thing to eat and break bread with people, but there could be times where that breaking of bread could be with yourself and your thoughts. So that's just kind of one of many instances where you could weave in a significant amount of solitude to be with yourself without truly disrupting all the other patterns that you have in your life.
I absolutely love and don't want to skip past this because it's so critical. In fact, as I was listening to you talk about solitude, I got chills, tears came to my eyes. I could feel my heart getting really full because it's so true and something that so many of us, you know, me included, we get very busy and we forget that even, I cherish my morning walks, but I often, if somebody wants to talk or there's a podcast I want to listen to or something happening, I put my earbuds in and I tend to whatever that is. And I sometimes forget that that's not alone time anymore. That's busy time. That is not, as you critically, said, it is self reflection. And it's not about, you can be with a crowd of people and still have internal solitude. It is about creating that sacred space. And you can be walking around other people, but if you are quiet inside your being, isn't that where so much self growth and self reflection occurs? And I also think, and this is a question for you, I have found in my work as a psychologist that so many people run away from that quiet time because there's such pain in there, so many emotions, unprocessed grief, unprocessed loss, unprocessed hopes and dreams, relationship angst, all sorts of things come up when we're quiet. And so many people self soothe with various things. And so, what do you think about that piece about how solitude, how sometimes we misinterpret it, and then we make some quiet time, and then all of a sudden stuff starts percolating, saying, "Look at me, listen to me," and then we go, "Oh, don't want to do that."
It's hard to it's a gift that when you're given it, it's hard to appreciate the magnitude of it. We're trained in some ways from our modern age and in some ways just as human beings to look for distractions, entertainment. I was going to say something about reading and how meaningful that is for me, but I have to say that reading is a different channel of self-discovery. It's a different experience than being utterly still and utterly with yourself, because you're still, your imagination is going somewhere else. It has amazing benefits, but I couldn't tell someone, oh, do your favorite, Pinterest board or your favorite Jane Austen novel, and it's still just as good. I'm not sure it is, and I think there's room for both of those things. But the enormity of stillness and being in your own space, whether physical or just spiritually or mentally, is very, very significant and very rare in most people's lives.
And I like this piece before we move on to your next tip because for our listeners, remember, no matter what you have in your pocketbook, right? No matter what's in your bank account, this is something we can all access. We can access stillness by slowing down, finding, time in the bathroom, time in your bedroom, time in your closet, time in your backyard to breathe, just to be, time on a bus where you can turn inward, breathe, and just be with yourself. So we don't need money to find stillness, which is such a relief because so many, that form of self-care, it's absolutely free. So thank you so much for that piece. What is another tip? But before you say that, I did want to say about the reading that it also too depends upon what you're reading. If you're reading a self-help book, that's not stillness, but it is self-reflection. And not to say that Jane Austen's books don't make us self-reflect. Sometimes she has such words of wisdom, right? And we can see ourselves in the characters that we do. Sometimes it really stimulates self-growth, self-reflection. And a Pinterest board, depending upon what you're doing with it, that can be maybe not self-growth work, but it can certainly be healing work.
Yeah, and that's true. And one thing you can do when you do finish a book or are in a book that you can sit and think about, why do I love this book so much? And so by answering those questions, whether it is self-help or fiction, it can reveal a lot, and sometimes things that you didn't really know, or at least you never articulated about yourself. And it could be a real moment of enlightenment, just to take that time think, why do I love this so much? What does that say about me?
Okay, quick pause. Can't miss this opportunity. What is one children's book? Because I don't know this about you, and you won't know. Maybe you'll know mine about me. But what is one children's book that really spoke? One or two that really spoke to you, where you were like, "Oh, why am I reading this over and over again?" Children's book.
The children's books that I remember as a child, or the children's books that I read to my children?
Whichever ones made you feel like you were looking in a mirror, or there was some message for you.
The Giving Tree is one that I do not remember reading as a child. I don't quite know when it was written, but The Giving Tree I did read to my children, and I just love that book.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, that makes me so happy. I have the Giving Tree stamps right behind me that
really?
someone gifted me because I love that book, Shel Silverstein. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
just the message of
Mm.
a young boy, going through joys and disappointments, and this living thing just giving this little boy everything it had, and that they come full circle. I'm sure most of the people listening to us has read that book, but if not, The Giving Tree is just a jewel. I will say, for me as a child, the Little House books, were probably some of the most meaningful books that I read, and were read to me as a child. I love the story of a pioneer girl. I love the story of a little girl who tries to be good and isn't as good as her bigger sister. There are a lot of themes that Laura Ingalls Wilder introduced in her books, and the physical descriptions that she had of 19th century pioneer life that are unparalleled, and it made me love history, and it made me love the country that I was born in, and they gave me so many gifts.
Little House on the Prairie, talk about, well, and that's, she was really dealing with imperfection, wasn't she? But that's its own podcast. I do have a fun fact that I didn't know about Shel Silverstein's Giving Tree, that apparently the book was a no-no in certain schools for this reason, that the tree was seen as a feminine that gave too much. And so that book was not allowed in certain schools for a while. Oh, there goes your mouth. Yes, it is an interesting take on the book because I didn't see it that way myself. So, fun fact, but moving on. So I can see both of those books, and I would have to say for me, the ones I remember the most are, and they really tell a lot about me, is The Princess and the Pea, because I feel everything. Give me no matter how many mattresses you give me, I feel everything. And the other one was The Ugly Duckling, because I
Uh,
always felt like the ugly duckling, but I knew, and also Are You My Mother? I think that was the book where the little bird is looking like, who are my parents? Where do I find my parents? But anyway, those are all. So isn't it funny that our books, those early books, can tell us so much sometimes, not only about who we were as children, but how wise we were, how we were looking for role models, looking for answers to questions, and tying it back to the topic of today's podcast. I find that looking back at favorite children's books sometimes really helps us see that we've always been searching. It's just sometimes we stop searching because we're so busy struggling with day to day life, and how important it is to continue searching in that curious, big way that we did when we were kids.
and I have to say that's one of the biggest gifts that new parents have, that they have the opportunity to revisit not only their own childhood books,
Mhm.
but to open their children's eyes to new ones, and to see the ones that their children beg them to read over and over. It's really a really great second chance for new parents.
Absolutely. So I digressed. I took us off course. So now back course two. So you gave us this great tip about solitude and the importance of self-reflection. So what maybe one or two more simple tips that our listeners can really access for how can you start this journey of finding or reclaiming yourself? Solitude, is fabulous. So what would number 2 be?
I think discovering a new passion or a new pastime that lends itself to quiet time and solitude. And one thing that does come to mind is gardening. And I know that gardening is something that a lot of people think, oh, I can't do that. And I like to call myself a gardener, but I wouldn't say that I would be most talented gardeners would not include me in their club, but I enjoy the prospect of trying to plant something and hope that it lives for more than 2 weeks. And there's a joy that comes from going out and seeing the things that you've planted. And it's like, wow, that really worked. And so I do understand when gardeners do talk about that joy they have in going out in the backyard. A lot of people, it's really something to it. And I know not everybody has a backyard, but everybody has a place to put a pot. And the joy of being able to snip off basil leaves for your dinner, it cannot be overstated. And and as far as how does that contribute to solitude? It's an internal exercise. Maybe I'm not explaining it right, but it's something about gardening or trying to raise living things uh, almost forces you to look inward and to be contemplative.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And it's not about us being master gardeners because we're imperfect and it's okay. And I think that's the lesson with gardening. Not only plants are so forgiving, they're so patient with us. And, I too, I'm harvesting my basil now and, not a big space to garden, but it's about, like you're saying, it's the time to watch the miracle of nature, to contemplate on how nature is so forgiving and tolerant, and it gives us such abundance, especially at this, in the spring and summer and fall where there's just such abundance. It teaches us gratitude, but it also gives us a chance to put our hands in the soil again, whether we have a little pot and we're just, watering house plants or herbs on a kitchen counter, whatever it is. It just invites us to witness the miracle of life. And the imperfect, are the fruit we grow at home, the little basil leaves. They're not perfect, and we love them. We just love them because, and we don't compare them. Oh, this basil plant's better than that. We just go, oh, I'm so grateful for the basil. And such a good mantra for us to remember when we're looking in the mirror. We don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be that perfect piece of basil or that perfect tomato or that perfect, face. We can just be grateful that we're alive.
It's so true.
Yeah, so that it makes sense. Gardening, probably, I'm not much of a like I don't knit or things like that, but I would imagine that also crafting, like you said, doing a vision board on Pinterest or um, you know, playing in the sand, anything creative can really help you, especially if your mind's not busy doing other things. Like you don't have that thing going in your head, the
There
TV in
there
the
are
back.
there are a lot of physical activities. Sewing that's a great point with crafting and
Mm.
sewing. Even if you are a runner or something where there's something about physical exercise or just doing something physical that almost disengages your mind and allows you to have great thoughts. A lot of things that I remember very distinctly were thoughts that I had. I can't run anymore because my knees don't work as well, but when I did run, it sort of created this enriched compartment in my imagination so that I remember a lot of what I thought about while working out. And so that's what a lot of people, if they open their minds to that, if they don't like to garden or don't like to read, a lot of people like to work out. There are a lot of ways you can really tune into yourself while you're exerting yourself.
That is such a good point, and maybe even its third tip alone, the importance of exercise. So no matter where you are physically, whether you're, lifting tiny weights in your living room or taking a hike or going for a run. I know for me, when, as a yoga instructor and constant yoga student, how important it is to notice. I know for me, I actually had to create this mantra of be here, be love, because my mind tries to leave me and go, there I'm on the yoga mat practicing peace and meditation. And my mind's going, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. And that constant work of bringing it back to the moment where we can grow in that moment if we are just present with the self, letting thoughts come up, letting them go, and noticing that we can just be. We don't always have to be on the hamster wheel with the mind.
Exactly.
Okay, last final tip.
So here's something that I think everybody can do. My background is in creating spaces in the backyard that are separate from the house for women and men to have, really great private space. But I will say that if you think about where you go after a hectic work day or a hectic day with your family and kids, I almost guarantee there's a little corner of your apartment or condo or house or whatever that you have your stamp on. It could just be a chair. It could be even a little place on the carpet, and where two walls meet, where there's a really pretty window that gives you great light. You already have a me room where you live, and you may not consider it a room, but it is, because that's where you go. And if somebody's sitting there and you're ready to use it, you're like, get out of my space. That's mine. And it's not rude, it's like, I think most families like, oh, that's mom's reading chair. The cats will go on it, but the people will know better than, okay, that's where mom reads, leave it alone. And so celebrate that little corner of your living space, and recognize it as my sacred space, my she shed, whatever you want to call it. And it's really amazing that when you're there, you get these imaginary walls, in a good way, start kind of enclosing you and making it private, a place where you can hear yourself think. And so everybody has a dedicated space in their house, and you should recognize it and be happy about it.
I love that so much, especially the part about it being something as simple as a chair. It can be the place on the back deck. It can be your front stoop. It can be the seat on the bus that's always yours. It can be, I know there have been times in my life where my car was my sacred space.
Yeah, cars are a really, really,
Right.
really safe
Yeah,
space.
just finding a place, pulling over, and okay, this car, this is my sacred space right here, right now.
And I don't know if you've noticed, Carla, have you noticed more people staying in their cars longer when maybe you're seeking out their parking spot? I've really noticed an uptick in, and maybe it's, for catching up on texts, but it's other things too. It's transitioning yourself from one spot to the next. It's taking a little nap. I kind of like the trend, except when I want their parking space. But have you noticed that?
Now that you say it, I actually have. And in our area, there's quite a lot of homelessness. So people are unfortunately having to resort to making their homes in a car, and that is their safe space. But I have also noticed, you're right, that there is that, and I actually recommend that. It's interesting with clients who have a difficult time transitioning from work to home, that it's okay to go leave work. In fact, really important, sit in your car, breathe, drive home, sit in your car, breathe, unpack, leave your briefcase metaphorically in the car so that you can transition and go into home and be present. And when we start looking at, I mean, absolutely love that you said it can be as simple as a chair, as simple as a seat in a car, because that really opens up making a space of your own, which is so important, because it's heartbreaking at times in life where we feel like we don't have any place that's our own. The TV is too loud, the musics are too loud, the kids are too loud, work is too loud, people are at our desk, this, that. And to realize, wait a second, we have the right to say, time out. I love you. I care about you. but right now is me time. This is my sacred space. And if we're blessed enough, maybe we have a garage, a man cave, a little she shed, that doesn't need to be expensive. They can be cobbled together out of, I've seen some in your book that are just like so magically precious, all salvaged pieces. It's just, I mean, gorgeous that we have that right, whether it's a physical space or, well, they're always, or a place where we just want to be, to say right now, please, I need this space for me, just to collect, just to restore, and just to be. So, oh my goodness, you're such a leader in this area, and I am so grateful for it. So grateful.
Well, it's a great space to be. And I'm always looking for new ways to help people manifest that sense of aloneness. And one of the things I was going to suggest too, if it's just a corner of your small, like even a folding screen, they're very inexpensive. Just having sort of that visibility block, even if it's temporary, makes a
Mm.
huge difference. There's a lot of different ways you can do that with hanging plants, a lot of different, streamer, like beaded curtain kinds of things, a lot of cute things you can do to create your own little room.
Absolutely. And I just want to give a nod back to childhood. We know as kids, when we do the little blankies over the chair or over the table to crawl under, we know the importance as children of having that quiet, sacred space. And we forget that often as we grow. We get too busy for it or too old for it. And I'll tell you, there are times I want to put a blankie over a table and crawl underneath
I know. The
and curl
fort.
up or create a little fort. We can come to my fort sometime, Erica.
I love it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. It's such a blessing, such a joy. And where can our listeners find you and see more about what you do?
Well, you can find me. I run a business called She Shed Living. I've read the books I read led me to trying to help women find their own space, whether it's inside their house or a backyard structure. And so She Shed Living, which I run with my partner Sabrina, is a small woman-owned business here in Southern California. And we have a website that has lots of cool resources that actually might help you fashion that little, whether it's a physical shed of your own or space of your own, or a spiritual space of your own. We've got a lot to share there.
Excellent. So, website address is?
Website address, sheshedliving.com.
Okay, and you're on Instagram, I imagine?
She Shed Living.
Okay, easy peasy. Anywhere else we should be looking for She Shed Living?
Yeah, you'll pretty much find us if you type in She Shed Living. We've got a great Pinterest page, got all kinds of stuff. So I hope we see you there.
Absolutely. And listeners, if you're like me, maybe you can just look and dream about some of those she sheds. And I'll tell you, just looking is sometimes truly cathartic. So again, thank you for sharing your time with me. You're such a blessing. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.